What are some of the creepiest experiments ever done in human history? While working at the Japan-based nuclear power plant, 35-year-old Hisashi Aoki received the highest dose of radiation ever administered to a human. After accidentally adding too much uranium to a batch of nuclear fuel, a nuclear reaction occurred, emitting neutron radiation and gamma rays. Immediately, Aoki and his companions were blasted with radiation, taking an immense toll on their bodies instantaneously. Although Aoki's companions were also hit with well over fatal doses of radiation, Aoki's body absorbed far more than his co-workers. By miraculous chance, Aoki survived. He would have been far better off if he had died, though. The radiation ravaged Aoki's body. His white blood cell count dropped to near zero, destroying his immune system. He sustained severe burns, and his skin began to rot away. At one point, his eyes just started bleeding uncontrollably. His body was entirely deteriorating. Aoki was being kept alive solely by the doctors who pumped blood and other fluids into his system. Aoki begged to be released from his pain, but even though everyone knew he would die anyways, they refused to kill him. You see, the Japanese government was studying the effects of radiation on the human body. On the 59th day of Aoki's treatment, his heart stopped 3 times. Aoki had no chance of survival. The radiation had destroyed his chromosomes, the fundamentals of what made him human. His body was physically unable to produce any replacement cells. Aoki lived for 83 days tied to a hospital bed, in extreme pain as his body deteriorated. On the 83rd day, Aoki was finally relieved from life as his organs simultaneously collapsed. 83 days of being kept alive against his will so that the government could watch him die in one of the worst ways imaginable. This picture shows some of the first days after Hisashi Aoki was blasted with over 17 sieverts of radiation. I don't advise looking up any other pictures. Humanity can be despicable. That's all I have to say. Alexis St. Martin was a fur trader who was at the wrong place at the wrong time. A shotgun had accidentally been shot at him. Dr. William Beaumont was quickly called to inspect the wound. The shotgun had ripped a hand-sized hole into St. Martin's stomach. Beaumont attempted to repair the wound with no success. St. Martin could not eat without the food spilling through the hole in his stomach. He was forced to be fed through anal injections. That's when Beaumont's curious mind took over. There was a living stomach for him to experiment on. At the time, it was debated whether the stomach digested food mechanically or chemically. Beaumont could find out. Beaumont began spooning food into St. Martin's stomach only to dig it out later. Beaumont would dangle meat on a string into the hole and then pull it out to observe. Beaumont performed more than 200 experiments over the next 10 years on St. Martin. St. Martin chose to go through the experiments because he was very poor, and the money Beaumont gave him was more than he could have gotten. Beaumont was able to determine that food is digested chemically. For this he is known as the father of gastric physiology. David Reimer, 1965 to 2004. I do not know if this counts as an experiment, but I cannot help but feel that Reimer was treated like a lab rat. David was one of a set of twins born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, as Bruce Reimer. When he was 6 months old, he was subjected to an unconventional method of circumcision that involved electric burning, and things went badly when his penis was basically burned beyond repair. His parents were concerned about the boy's future, and when he was 2 years old they took him to the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, to meet with psychologist John Money. Money was a huge believer that gender was a social construct and persuaded the Reimers to subject their son to a gender reassignment surgery. The Reimers went ahead and did so, and Bruce was renamed Brenda. During her childhood, Brenda was subjected to many exercises by Dr. Money to make sure he would be girl-like. Money kept a record about Brenda's progress, but the Reimers would routinely lie about the results to make the doctor happy. Brenda had a miserable childhood. It was obvious she was different from the other girls and was teased by the other children about it. Brenda was made to take female hormones but claimed they had no effect. David talked about allowing a boy to kiss him once and did not like it at all. When she was 13 years of age, Brenda told her parents she would commit suicide if they made her see Dr. Money ever again. The parents complied and told her the truth about her identity. At 14, Brenda renamed himself David and went through a reversal of gender reassignment. When he was 22 years old, he went public with his story and many people were horrified by his ordeal. He received enormous public support and even made an appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show, but David still suffered from depression. His twin brother, Brian, suffered psychological damage from this as well, since he was an unwilling participant in Dr. Money's exercises to make David feel more girl-like, and also from survivor's remorse, if you will. Brian took his own life in 2002. David's relationship with his parents understandably never repaired and his marriage fell apart. David took his own life in 2004 at the age of 38, 2 years after his twin brother. There are many feminists today who claim gender is nothing more than a social construct. All of them should be required to read up on David Reimer's story. No one has mentioned the little Albert experiment. This experiment was done on a child named Albert B. He was 9 months old when John B. Watson, the famous psychologist, chose him for the experiment. This experiment was started with white color and a bang of hammer. Watson exposed the boy with white-colored rat, a rabbit, a monkey, and masks, etc. Initially, he showed no fear to them. But this time, when white rat was exposed to him, he made a loud noise with a bang of hammer. On hearing this noise, naturally, the boy started crying. He repeatedly paired the white rat with noise for 7 weeks. After this, whenever the boy was exposed to white color, he, regardless of noise produced, will start crying. This made the little boy to fear white color. He demonstrated this experiment to prove classical conditioning in humans. Yet he proved this. In this experiment, different stimuli and responses were as follows. Neutral stimulus, the white rat. Unconditioned stimulus, the loud noise. Unconditioned response, fear. Conditioned stimulus, the white rat. Conditioned response, fear. Albert proved conditioning in humans. He started crying on seeing every white-colored thing. In today's psychology, this is considered as one of the most notorious experiments. John Watson was unable to knock the fear out of his head. Albert moved from the city. Albert, according to some, whose real name was Douglas Merritt, had a bad ending. He died at the age of 6 on May 10, 1925 of hydrocephalus. This experiment will be remembered in the history of psychology. A lot of debate has been done on this experiment, and according to my opinion, this was an unethical experiment. Thanks for reading. I'm sure you've heard about Japan. They are renowned for the video games, the smart toilets, the robots, and specifically, the creepy TV shows that air there. In fact, our story starts off with a team of movie makers and one unfortunate soul. Nasabi is a Japanese comedian who was just finishing his education, desperate for money, when he entered a drawing for a fame-related prize. This prize, something you will later come to see as very disturbing, was created by famous show directors on Nippon television. He was promised a room with free heating, electricity, and running water in return for his participation in an experiment. This TV network told him that he would start off naked, an eggplant edited over his genitals, winning money from only raffles to survive. Make the equivalent to $10,000 in winnings before retiring from the challenge. All would be done with prior consent and nothing afterward. He didn't even know that he was being recorded the whole time. So, he did just that. For months, he survived on raffle and lotto tickets, stacked in a neat pile on a table in the room. Over time, Nasabi got thin. He got tired. Weak. Scary. Helpless. He got used to no clothes and would have clothing anxiety for years after the experiment. Even with all the pain, he still made it. He won. By the time Nasabi won, he didn't even know what was going on. He was confused. He looked like a homeless guy with no sense of his surroundings. This wasn't it, though. The TV network, by this point, had made so much money, they couldn't just let Nasabi go. After all, he was helping Nippon make a fortune. So, against his will, they blindfolded him and took him to a new apartment. This time, it didn't have the same luxuries as the last one. This time, he was to make even more money. For season 2. Nasabi continued. He lived naked, was watched, and was laughed at. When he finally finished, Nippon blindfolded him once more and this time, placed him in a new room. Except, this time, it was a box with no windows. No fresh air. Only light and entry tickets. His goal for this new season was to continue pulling in more prize money. He started working. This time, he finished the challenge on the same night. By now, Nasabi had no awareness of his surroundings. He didn't remember the last time he talked, made sense, had human contact, or even showed emotion. The box he was in suddenly dropped and there he was, being laughed and applauded at, by thousands of viewers. Camera flashes, human laughter, sudden exposure, and being naked. The poor man was made into an internet joke. God bless. I hope he's doing well, now mentally. His prize winnings were mediocre, but he still achieved a Guinness World Record and a place in the internet directories. Now, he's a comedian, according to Google, and is working on other projects. The monster study was a psychological experiment conducted by Dr. Wendell Johnson and Mary Tudor on 22 orphan children in 1939. Amidst the study's extremely low ethical standards, its results were never published, for Johnson feared that it would be likened to numerous experiments carried out by the Nazi regime. Dr. Johnson believed that repeatedly telling a child they were a stutterer had the potential to give a completely healthy child a stutter. 22 young orphan children were recruited to partake in Johnson's study. They were split into two groups, stutterers and non-stutterers. The 11 children who actually did have a stutter were told that they were perfectly healthy, whereas the remaining 11, who were stutter-free, were told that they needed severe speech therapy to correct their stuttering. Quite horrifically, Johnson was trying to induce stuttering into otherwise healthy children. The stutter-free children were, in part, told, "The staff has come to the conclusion that you have a great deal of trouble with your speech. You must try to stop yourself immediately. Don't ever speak unless you can do it right." And the stuttering children were told, "Pay no attention to what others say about your speaking ability, for undoubtedly they do not realize that this is only a phase." In short, one half of the children were given positive speech therapy, and the other half were belittled and punished for every small error they made. What about the results? Of 6 healthy children exposed to the negative speech therapy, 5 developed a stutter after 6 months of treatment. Upon realizing the damage his experiment had caused, Johnson tried desperately to undo his work, but to no avail. Children in the negative therapy group never escaped their problems, carrying to adulthood symptoms of depression and a severe lack of confidence, especially when talking. In 2007, 7 of the original orphan children were awarded $1.2 million in compensation for the emotional trauma caused by Johnson's experiment. And it's for this reason that the monster study is still considered one of the most twisted experiments of all Western culture. Its blatant manipulation of the human condition was certainly not within the ethical boundaries of any respected scientific study. Creepiest is a subjective term. So here is an experiment which I find particularly terrifying. Rhythm 0, 1974 by Marina Abramovic. Rhythm 0, 1974, was a 6-hour work of performance art by Yugoslav artist Marina Abramovic in Studio Mora, Naples. The work involved Abramovic standing still while the audience was invited to do to her whatever they wished, using one of 72 objects she had placed on a table. These included a rose, feather, perfume, honey, bread, grapes, wine, scissors, a scalpel, nails, a metal bar, and a gun loaded with 1 bullet. There were no separate stages. Abramovic and the visitors stood in the same space, making it clear that the latter were part of the work. The purpose of the piece, she said, was to find out how far the public would go, what is the public about and what are they going to do in this kind of situation. Her instructions were placed on the table. Instructions. There are 72 objects on the table that one can use on me as desired. Performance. I am the object. During this period I take full responsibility. Duration, 6 hours, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. As Abramovic described it later, what I learned was that, if you leave it up to the audience, they can kill you. I felt really violated. They cut up my clothes, stuck rose thorns in my stomach, one person aimed the gun at my head, and another took it away. It created an aggressive atmosphere. After exactly 6 hours, as planned, I stood up and started walking toward the audience. Everyone ran away, to escape an actual confrontation. When the gallery announced the work was over, and Abramovic began to move again, she said the audience left, unable to face her as a person. This brave, curious, fearless woman put herself in front of an audience for 6 hours straight without reacting, being a puppet for the audience as she puts it. They started with small harmless gestures. Someone handed her a rose, someone placed a kiss, some moved her in different poses. As time passed, their harmless acts started turning violent. They cut her clothes, stuck rose thorn on her stomach. Someone cut, slightly, her throat and sucked her blood. They put plaster on her body and wounds. There was a gun with a bullet which at one time was pointed to her head and the person was working her fingers on the trigger. As the cruelty increased, there was a group of audience that then had their conscience awakened. Another member from the audience took away the gun and threw it out the window. After enduring whole 6 hours of this torture, as she promised she would, when the gallerist came and announced that the performance was over, she then reclaimed herself and started walking towards the audience as planned. To which the audience responded by running away. This experiment showed the world that unsupervised, not holding people responsible for their deeds, shielded from the consequences of their actions, normal people turn evil. Members of mankind calling themselves empathetic and morally upstanding members of this society could so easily harm and torture another human being. When confronted with the outcome of the situation, i.e., they just hurt another living being, they ran. It forces us to think what a human mind is capable of doing and its destructive nature.